explain that. Well, this explains it. If it's good for man, it's bad for the planet. Anti-human much. Now, let's get back to Morris Strong. This guy, you need to know his name, because what he has done, you can put him up there with Gandhi and a few others, a very few others, and the impact he's had on the planet Earth, people on the planet Earth. 1972, when he first became the leader of the UN Environment Program, they had the first UN gathering that focused specifically on climate. It was the Stockholm Earth Summit. They have those Earth Summits every few years. 1987, they had a World Commission on Environment and Development, and Norway's socialist ex-prime minister wrote the report that came from that commission. And in that report, she introduced the world to this phrase, sustainable development. Not just about the environment, it's about social equity, economic growth. Oh, yeah, and the environment. Sustainable development. Keep that in mind, you're going to see that again. 1988, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You've heard of that. They're the people who put up those assessment reports every 5 or 6 years. They call them the environment on the spot. They're the reports based on these wildly erroneous climate models, computer climate models. They've been proven again and again to be wildly wrong, and they still crank them out. Now, a man named Stephen Koonin just wrote a book last year, I think. I'm trying to think of the name of it. He's not a right-winger. He was Obama's Undersecretary of Energy. But he's a scientist first. And he wrote a book talking about all this. How the IPCC, the science part of it, the 3,000 pages in the science part of it, are not bad. He said the science is not bad. He said by the time it gets translated to the summary for policymakers, the scientists don't write that part. The politicians write that part. And what you'll find, if you read both of them, you'll find 180-degree opposition in the summary from what the scientists say. So I had to back off a little bit about condemning scientists for not standing up. They actually put the science out there. It's the politicians that twist it around and pervert it. 1992, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change is another one of Mr. Strong's brainchildren. And that is actually the umbrella organization over all of the rest of it that's driving this climate hysteria. Okay, the IPCC, the Earth Summits, the COPs, they're having one in November in Dubai, Conference of Parties. But they all come under this Framework Convention on Climate Change, and all this was Morris Strong's idea. Now this is the big one. Agenda 21. This is the action plan for them to gain the global government they want in order to implement the agenda that's really behind this, which is not climate. It's going to combat poverty, change consumption patterns, achieve more sustainable population. How are they going to do that? And protect the environment. Now, what is sustainable development? Their definition: meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. All right, show of hands. How many people here can see into the future? Well, you couldn't work at the UN. They apparently can. They're speaking for generations of people unborn. Now, in 2015, the Agenda 21 stood for 21st century. They thought they would accomplish all these goals by the year 2000. Well, they didn't. So the year 2015, they said, we need to rebrand. We need to have a new marketing scheme. So they changed the name to Agenda 2030, but they have specific language in there that says, no, we're still going after every goal of Agenda 21. Really, the only change is they came up with some good graphics for these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And there they are. I don't know if you can read them or not. No poverty. Jesus Christ said the poor you'll always have with you. These guys, they must think they're God. Zero hunger, good health and well-being for everybody, quality education for everybody, gender equality, clean water and sanitation. If your 15 or 16-year-old child or grandchild came up with this, you just want to hug their neck for having such a good heart. These are the most powerful people, some of the wealthiest people on earth. Recognize that guy? There's a little pin they have that shows the 17 goals. He's got it on. You'll see pictures of John Kerry and Al Gore and Michael Bloomberg and all these people. Prime ministers, a lot of prime ministers, a lot of countries will wear that pin. They're all into this Agenda 21 thing. I'm not going to go through the entire Agenda 21. I'm going to go through about four little things. In the preamble, it said the implementation of Agenda 21 is first and foremost responsibility of governments. The UN has a key role, along with non-governmental organizations, people you and I didn't vote for, and public-private partnerships. That's essentially what Mike pointed out a long time ago. That's essentially fascism. Yeah, corporations own it, but they get in bed with the government. Then the government has corporations do things the government can't do, and then the corporations get tax breaks and protection of the government. Implementing Agenda 21 will require a substantial flow of financial resources from the West, United States and Western Europe, to developing countries. Well, how much is substantial? Just last month, John Kerry told us it's $2.5 to $4.5 trillion a year for 30 years. Winston Churchill, one of the greatest quotes about socialism ever, he said, "The great vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessing. The great vice of socialism is the equal sharing of misery." This is not designed to bring the developing nations up. This is designed to bring the developed nations down. Why? Because when you don't have food and somebody else controls your electricity and gas and water, you're a lot more compliant. You're not near as independent as you are and have been in this country. Chapter 4 says you consume too much. Major cause of deterioration of the global environment is unsustainable consumption, particularly in industrialized countries. Talking about us. We consume too much. Now, I'm going to show you something about this consuming too much. Buckle up. Club of Rome came up with a climate emergency plan in 2018. Halt fossil fuel expansion investments by 2020. Fossil fuels, the lifeblood of the world economy, halt that. This whole idea of net zero by 2050, folks, they're saying we're going to step back into about 1800, 1820 if you do this. The lifeblood of the economy is fossil fuels. What are they going to replace it with? Oh, well, we're going to have wind and solar. After 30 years, you know how many actual functioning windmills there are out there in the North Atlantic they've been talking about all this time? 7. Not 70, there are 7. And they have been subsidized to the tune of trillions of dollars. When I worked for TVA's Office of Communication, I worked at the Visitor Center at Sequoia and Watts Bar. I had to do research about all this. Wind and solar was never more than 3% of the source of electricity. They're saying now it's 20%. I think that's a bald-faced lie. I don't think it can ever be more than about 9 or 10%. So what are they going to replace the fossil fuels with? Don't know. Have consumption and production by 2030. What are all those people who are going to lose their job because you have production? What are they going to do for a living? Are they all going to be computer programmers? Consumption-based taxes. I can't believe it took them this long to get to this. I figured they'd get to this a long time ago. What does that mean? Well, that means you're going to tax individuals. That means, let's say you want a new pair of jeans. Well, they go through the whole supply chain back to the farmer who grows the cotton. Now, he has to use chemicals, right? Fertilizers. He has to use machinery to cultivate and harvest it. That's all on you. If you didn't want that pair of jeans, that wouldn't be happening. So we're going to tax you because you wanted that pair of jeans. Now, just follow that supply chain on. When they ship the raw cotton to the place, the weaving factory, where they weave it into fabric, well, it had to be shipped by trucks, right, or train. You caused that CO2 to be emitted into the atmosphere. And the machinery they use there to weave it into fabric, again, you're responsible for that, along with the heat and the lights, okay? And then when they ship it over to the place where they cut it and sew it into jeans, you're responsible for those emissions also. And when it goes to the retail outlets, air conditioning, lights, you're responsible for all of that. They're going to tax us, punish us for being a consumer. And in 2019, Klaus Schwab called this plan a new compass for nations. Now, that C40 group that I told you about, they came up with something about consumption they call interventions. What's an intervention? That's when you got a cousin or a son or a daughter who's on drugs or drinking, and the whole family gets together and tries to confront them and shock them into reality, right? To straighten up. They come up with 6 areas. Housing and infrastructure is one of them, buildings and infrastructure. IT and communications is another one. And then you've got food, aviation, private transport, in clothing and textiles. They have a progressive target for 2030. They have an ambitious target for 2050. Let's start with food. What do they want to do here? Switch to a lower carbon option. Change your diets. Don't eat any more than 2,500 calories a day. Now, right now, the average in the United States is anywhere from 3,600 to 4,200. Now, cutting back to 2,500 for some of us would be a good idea, right? But I'm going to do my best Greta Thunberg impression right now. How dare you tell me what to eat? Who the crap do these people think they are? Now, you've heard about Netherlands. They're supposedly trying to get rid of 200,000 head of cattle. And they want to get rid of cattle. Why do they want to get rid of cattle? Cow flatulence, cow farts, is putting methane into the atmosphere. Do you know how much methane there is in the atmosphere? 0.0000019%. But they're doing away with all of it. By 2030, you're not supposed to eat more than 10.6 ounces of meat a week. Not a day, a week. 3.5 ounces of that can be red meat. So you get a 3.5 ounce steak a week, or a 3.5 ounce hamburger a week. That's it. Dairy, 8.8 ounces a day. You had a glass of milk with breakfast this morning. You had a bowl of cereal. You don't get any feta cheese for your salad at lunch. Don't get any mozzarella for your pizza at dinner. This was put out in 2019, and obviously they've been criticized for it. And they said, "Oh no! This isn't a plan to impose on people. This was just an analysis model, just to look at things." What is that word right there? Target? I shoot recreationally. I know what a target is. You aim at it and you try to hit it. They're going to try to implement this, even though they're denying it. Now, that's not half as bad as the 2050. Eliminate all meat and dairy. Why? Because cows are bad for the environment. They fart too much and put methane into the atmosphere. It causes CO2. It causes global warming. You can't make some of this stuff up. How about aviation? One short haul or return trip every 2 years by 2030, one trip every 3 years by 2050. France has already banned all flights, domestic flights, shorter than 2 hours. And the European Union is looking at it very strongly to do the same thing. If they did that here, well, drive down to Atlanta, drive up to Nashville, drive up to Charlotte, drive up to Cincinnati, and catch a flight to wherever. You'd have to drive a car. With it, they're going to let you drive a car. Private transport. By 2030, your car should be lasting 20 years. I drive a 2006 Toyota Tacoma pickup. Got 140,000 miles on it, just now getting broke in. I'm going to have no problem meeting that. But this one, 50-year vehicle, maybe they know something the car makers don't know. How about this one? Reduce ownership. They want to get down to 190 vehicles per 1,000 people in the United States by 2030. Now, I know how that is. If you do the math, that's 5.2 people per vehicle. So they're talking about family. Each family used to have one vehicle. We're going to be so magnanimous and let you have a vehicle for your family. How many cars are there in the United States per 1,000 people today? Any idea when you take a stab at it? Almost 800. 3/4 of the cars need to be off the road in 7 years. This is not a model to impose on people. This is just a model to analyze. That's all this is. Yeah. How about this one? No private vehicles by 2050. Rick's already talked about the climate action plan, that eventually downtown you won't have any private vehicle. You'll walk or you'll ride a bike or you'll ride the electric buses or the electric auto drive taxis. No vehicles. The automobile is the single greatest mode of freedom that ever has been created for mankind. Jump in your car, drive across town, drive across the state, drive across the country. It made the people, the Okies, the doggone Dust Bowl, they just packed up and went to California, right? They're going to take that away. Clothing and textiles. By 2030, you can buy 8 new items per year. I don't know if a pair of socks is 1 item or 2. But by 2050, 3 new items per year. Chapter 5 in Agenda 21, growth of the world population places increasingly severe stress on our planet. Population policy. Wait a minute, population policy. Who are you to have a population policy? You're supposed to be our servant in the government. You're not supposed to have a population policy. China had a population policy. For decades, you could have one child. And then when they'd have a girl child, they would drown it or leave it out in the cold and let it die, because the boy child is the one who's responsible for taking care of the parents when they get too old to work. And now they've got, what is it, 6 or 7 males in China for every female? Oh, wait, but they can come over here, come to our southern border. There's a lot of women over here. We have a population policy. There it is right there. National Security Study Memorandum 200. It was written in 1974, and it was overseen by Henry Kissinger, who happened to be a close friend of David Rockefeller. Now, what was in it? Well, they kept it classified for 14 years. What happened in 1973? One of the most earth-shaking things that ever happened in this country. 1973. Roe versus Wade. You know what's in this? Promote abortion for population control. Promote abortion on demand, big time. Sex education, birth control. Tell kids how to use birth control so you don't have kids. Family planning. Encourage young families not to have children. Forced sterilization of the mentally enfeebled and others. That's what's in this. That's our population. That's still on the books. Chapters, this is the last one. Land use planning and management. Private land ownership is the principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth. This contributes to social injustice. Wait a minute. If I make a lot of money, that means there's some kind of social injustice that I took it away from you? That's how they think. It's a zero-sum game for them. If somebody makes a lot of money, you must have stolen it, took it from somebody else. Okay? Social justice can only be achieved if land is used in the interest of society as a whole. Public control of land use is therefore indispensable. You see anything in there about private property? Yeah, it's going away. This is their definition of social justice. The right of all people to benefit equally from the resources afforded by society and the environment. Those are Marx's words, straight out of Marx's writing. So, you mean social justice means I can sit on my big butt and drink beer, smoke dope all day, and I should get equal return from the environment and society that a person gets up at 4:30 and goes to work 8 to 10 hours a day. I should get the same thing. That's what they're saying social justice is. It's not. Look this up sometime, communitarianism. This is what they're using. Do you remember the 2008 housing crisis when everything collapsed? That was set up. Communitarianism, you need to look it up. But this is the thing you always hear. Individual rights must be balanced with community rights. I've got a little book that's got the Declaration of Independence in it and the Constitution of the United States. And nowhere in there is there anything about community rights. It's individual rights. This country was founded on individual rights. But what they're saying is you need to give up some of your individual rights so the community, i.e. the state, will have more rights. Now, Rosa Koire, that book I've recommended, Behind the Green Mask, greatest analogy I've ever seen. Let's say individual rights are a glass of milk. Okay? Community rights are a glass of water. You need to balance those two. Even though community rights don't exist except in their tortured imagination, well, you get a pitcher and you pour both of them in there. What do you get? You get watered down milk, watered down individual rights. But the people who had no rights, now all of a sudden they have more rights than they had before. This is what communitarianism is. They have this process where they'll create a problem like they did in the 2008. They say, well, there's a problem. Low-income people can't afford homes. Well, duh. They've never been able to afford homes. That's why you work hard, so that you can afford a home, right? They said, well, low-income people can't afford a home, so let's loosen up the qualifications. And that's what the government did. They forced the Clinton administration and Obama administration forced banks to loosen up the qualifications for loans. So all these people bought houses who could not afford them. And when they got foreclosed on, the housing market went kaput. Now, you'd think the mortgage people and the banks went out of business, right? No, they got bailed out by who? By us. But what happened to the middle class? That was what they wanted all along. They'll say, here's a problem, here's a solution, and then what comes out from that, always bad, that's what they were looking for in the first place. Look up communitarianism. It's very interesting, and it's very effective. It's pure collectivism, folks. The Soviet Union tried this. Didn't turn out too good for them. All this talk about sustainability, here's the one thing that's not sustainable. Middle-class lifestyles, high meat intake, fossil fuels, appliances. By the way, did you see where Jennifer Granholm, that wretched woman who's Secretary of Energy, just this week put heavy restrictions on natural gas furnaces. Just like 2 months ago, they put them on gas stoves. I had a buddy of mine say, I don't care what they say, I'm going to use my gas stove. Really? When they lean on the gas company, they shut off the gas back at the gas plant? You're not going to use it then. Appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, suburban housing, those are not sustainable. I want you to read that. They're talking about us stepping back into about 1850 or so and living like those people did then. Why? To save the planet. We have to save the planet. Now, why am I talking about all this UN stuff? Because the smart city thing is the World Economic Forum. Because in 2019, the socialist, yes, the socialist Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres from Portugal. Did you know since 1945 when the UN was started, almost every Secretary General and 95% of the undersecretaries have been socialist or Marxist? Anyway, 2019, Secretary General of the UN and Klaus Schwab did their little media thing and shook hands and grinned and agreed to accelerate implementation of Agenda 21/2030. Now, Vic did a great job telling us about Italy. They changed their name to local government. They helped write Agenda 21. They were there for 2 or 3 years as it was being written at the UN. Why did they do that? Because it gave this job security for them. They're the ones who come out and train the mayor's staff how to write that legislation in implementing this climate action plan. They send software. They have seminars to train people how to implement Agenda 21. They were a founding partner of the G20 Smart City Alliance who created the smart city concept. And one of the vice presidents, a man from Dade County, Florida, he was the vice president of Italy for 30 years. He said individual rights will have to take a back seat to the collective when you implement Agenda 21. Sometimes they get so bold, they're so close to their goal, they get kind of slack and say the quiet part out loud. You know who this guy is?
Yeah.
Yuval Noah Harari. I guess he's this generation's Stephen Hawking, right? He's supposed to be a brilliant guy. He is Klaus Schwab's senior advisor. And he said last year, the general public have become redundant, will be of little value to the elites in the future. He said, most people are not needed anymore because of computers and AI. That's Klaus Schwab's right-hand guy. They wrote this, the UN wrote this in '93, the year after Agenda 21 was started. These actions have to be implemented by every person on earth. It will change the activities of all people. It will require a profound reorientation of all humans unlike anything the world has ever experienced. Ever? I don't think we've experienced this before. Your papers, please. Now, I know you're thinking this guy's way over the top. No, no. If you do some research on this, it's going to scare you to death. And it should. They're 95% home. They've got most of this done. They've been working on it for 30 years while we've been living our lives and raising our family. How did this happen in the United States of America? Well, it was a bipartisan screwing. I'll tell you that. Excuse my language. Bush 41 signed Agenda 21. Now, it's not a legally binding treaty, so it didn't have to go before the Senate. So he just signed it and committed U.S. to it. Well, when Clinton took over, he created the President's Council on Sustainable Development. That was most of his cabinet representatives, and then the people from the World Wildlife Fund and the Sierra Club and the Environmental Defense Agency and all that kind of stuff. His cabinet people told Clinton, we could implement 2/3 of Agenda 21 by administrative action, and that's exactly what they have done. They have embedded Agenda 21 principles in the federal bureaucracy and the regulations. You're living under it now. These farmers are having a hard time because these regulations coming down. That's the regulations that are coming down. When Clinton and Gore said they were going to reinvent government, and when Obama said he was going to fundamentally transform America, you thought that was just political rhetoric, didn't you? This is what they were talking about. I learned a long time ago, somebody's hiding something, it needs to be hidden, and you need to find out what it is. One of the advisors of the President's Council on Sustainable Development said, look, participating in the UN advocated planning thing, that would bring out all the conspiracy nuts, the people who are scared of one world government. He says, so we didn't say anything about UN. We called it stuff like comprehensive planning and smart growth. So we wouldn't catch on that it's the UN doing their dirty work. And in 2015, Obama committed the U.S. to achieving Agenda 2030, which is just an updated version of Agenda 21. Now, that's all about the UN. How about the World Economic Forum? Well, this is our mission. A globalized world is best managed by a self-selected coalition of multinational corporations, governments, and civil society organizations. Self-selected. Where's the room in there for you and I to vote? Well, we're representative government. It says government. So I haven't had a representative government since about 1972. I don't know about you. Klaus Schwab called Morris Strong and Henry Kissinger, who he studied under for 2 years at Harvard Business School. He said those are his two main influences. And who were their main influences? David Rockefeller. You remember Rahm Emanuel, who was chief of staff for Obama in the first term? He's the one that said that infamous statement, never let a crisis go to waste. Well, the Great Reset came out, if you remember, during COVID, right? During that time, Klaus Schwab came out and said, this is the perfect opportunity to do a great reset and to get all these things accomplished. To change and move on from free market fundamentalism. That's free market capitalism. The fundamentalism is a sneer. That's a slur. That's a Christian fundamentalism. Oh, free market fundamentalism. You mean free market capitalism? The free market capitalism that's let over 1 billion people rise up out of poverty in the past 20 years. Get rid of that. We don't need that anymore. Why is it these millionaires and billionaires make all their money in the capitalist system? Then they turn around and want to dismantle it so you and I can't do that. I always found that strange. From the horse's mouth. This is what Klaus Schwab has said, quotes, capitalism needs to be reformed. Made his money. Does capitalism need some Marxism to survive? The Great Reset is a new social contract. You didn't know you needed a new social contract, did you? I didn't either until Klaus Schwab told us we did. Well, what would that contract look like? Will that be the individual liberty and the rights that we have under the Constitution? Shake your head like this. No, it will not. If you don't get anything else out of this presentation tonight, I hope you remember this quote by Daniel Webster right here. There are men in all ages who mean to govern well, but they mean to govern. They promise to be good masters, but they mean to be masters. Does Tim Kelly fall into that category? I don't know him. I don't know anything about him. I know he went to Columbia. I know he can't be stupid. He knows this. He knows this is not about the climate. And people say, oh, you're just one of those right-wing conspiracy nuts. It's really about the climate. Is it? Tonight when you go home, look this up. It's still online. I looked at it just last week. It was a World Economic Forum video they made in 2016. And all you hear today, if you look it up, say, you'll own nothing and be happy. CNN, Reuters, AP, New York Times, USA Today, they all say the same thing. Oh, nobody ever said that. That's just a conspiracy crap from the right-wingers. This is a video that the World Economic Forum made in 2016, and here's what it says. And it's all young, happy, healthy people just tickled to death. Be going down to this totalitarian rabbit hole. By 2030, you'll own nothing, but we'll be happy, and you'll rent everything you need, and it'll be delivered to you by a drone at your doorstep. Who owns that stuff you're renting from? The U.S. will not be a superpower. A handful of countries will dominate. What has that got to do with the climate? You'll eat much less meat for your health and for the health of the planet. Fossil fuels will be history. The fossil fuels, the lifeblood of the economy. We'll step back in about 1800 so we can get rid of those nasty fossil fuels. Western values will have been tested to the breaking point. Again, what has that got to do with the climate? It ain't about the climate, folks. It's about a small group of elites who want to impose their vision of the future on everybody else. On the World Economic Forum website, January 2020 article said social justice must be at the center, C-E-N-T-R-E, because they're so European, you know. Social justice has to be at the center of the Great Reset. Here's some of the things they said. This is from their website, their words, their language. Wealth needs to be more broadly distributed. Well, $2.5 to $4.5 trillion a year for 30 years, I guess that'll do the job. Did you know our national budget, until Joe Biden took office, our national budget was about $3.5 to $4 trillion a year. So they're talking about basically the whole budget of the United States every year given to developed countries for social equity. Capitalism and socialism need to merge. You know that communitarian thing I told you about? When you merge them, which one loses here, you think? You think that one? Government needs to intervene more for fairness and equity. What? I think they intervene quite too much already. Thank you. Public and private partnerships we have to go more toward public-private partnerships in order to ensure equity and efficiency. Mussolini ran for whatever they call the head of Italy back before World War II. He promised to make the trains run on time. Because everything worked in Italy, he promised to make the trains run on time. And he did. Thomas Sowell, brilliant economist, always says, listen, when politicians promise you something, ask this question: at what cost? Well, nothing, just your constitutional rights and freedoms, that's all. David Rockefeller said, give us the power, we'll manage everything much better than your politicians do. Yes, sir, you can manage things really well when you have everybody under your thumb. Stakeholder capitalism. This is Mr. Schwab's baby. This is his brainchild. No, it's not. He's been preaching since 1973. He said he came up with it. He did not. It was a 1937 Nazi law called the Shareholder Act that said you have to look at public welfare before individual profits or gains, and you need to use public-private partnerships. This is nothing new, folks. This has been around for a long, long time. It's the same old story dressed up in a new party dress. The mayor's sustainability plan. Edmund Burke said that people only give up their liberties under some delusion, and that's what this is. It's a misdirection. It's an illusion of peace and prosperity and happiness, and it's a big, gigantic lie. It's about power for a few elites that they think they know better than the rest of us. And by the way, most of us won't be here. They still want to get rid of 7 or 8 billion people. Now, did I go over the top here by talking about